Are you running a marathon? Oh my god, I could never run a marathon. You sure about that? My god, a marathon? That's like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people.
That used to be me, but not anymore. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast. My name is Christian Warwick, aka Warwick Runs on different platforms. Really appreciate you being here, listening to the Marathon Podcast. If you watched my latest video on YouTube, you might have seen that I was wearing this same hoodie that I'm wearing today. And it's one of my favorite hoodies. And today I am really proud to say that I have the founder of Tracksmith with me on the podcast, Matt Taylor. We are just about to have a chat, and I'm super excited to hear more about Tracksmith's journey, about how Matt founded Tracksmith, what the reason was for the idea. I'm curious to hear more about his own running. I know that he comes from running, or that running has been a big part of his life. And I'm obviously curious about Tracksmith going forward. There are a lot of exciting things going on there. And I obviously have a lot of experience with their apparel myself, having worn it for a lot over the last year. And I always feel so proud when I put on anything from Tracksmith, and the quality is great. So just genuinely super excited to have a chat with Matt. And I'm honestly, I don't know, it feels a bit surreal that he said yes to come on the podcast. And I think that is just another proof of him kind of representing the brand in such a good way that, Tracksmith seems to be such an honest and nice and kind-hearted brand in a lot of ways. And that's exactly the way I've felt in the communication leading up to this conversation. Super excited to talk to Matt. So I'm just going to jump on this call with him, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm excited. Matt, welcome to the Marathon Podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
No, I really appreciate you being here, and I'm very excited to talk to you. Before we dive into running and Tracksmith, I want to ask you something that I've been thinking a lot about, and that is, for those of us, those listeners that can see us, they can see that I'm wearing Tracksmith right now, and it's a hare. Why a hare? Where did that come from?
Yeah, when we were developing the brand identity, my co-founder and I, we were looking at some reference points, and one of the things we wanted is a brand that felt like, maybe when people experienced it for the first time, that they would think that it had been around longer than it actually had been, and a brand that could be timeless and still exist 100 years from when we started it. And in that research, you quickly see that a lot of brands, I don't mean just apparel, but just brands in general that we all know and love that have been around for hundreds of years, often have an animal as a mascot, as a symbol. And so we started that exploration. We looked at birds of prey, which is just a personal interest of mine, and then the hare, and ultimately landed on the hare. There's a lot of attributes that kind of lives and dies by its speed, which felt appropriate, and can be a bit in fiction and literature, the character of the hare is often whimsical and a bit irreverent, and so there was just a lot of elements we liked. And then we were fortunate to find an illustrator, a guy named Gary Chalk, who sort of has a very particular style of hand-drawn illustrations, and a lot of animals in that body of work. And so we reached out to him, and he drew 3 versions of the hare, and we actually have all 3 of those, but we chose one, which is the one on your sweatshirt. The main sort of silhouette of the hare in stride is the primary logo. But we do have 2 other versions that we don't really use, more for internal stuff, but maybe someday we'll bring them out. But yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I do see what you mean of that being kind of, I don't know, like timeless, and it feels like it's been around for longer just because of that. And yeah. I realize now that you were talking about this, and I don't know if you're aware of it, but in Norwegian, like if you translate it directly, a hare is also the term we use for a pacer. when it comes to running.
Yeah,
So
of
in
course.
marathons and on the track,
Yeah.
we say a hare. I don't know if you'd say that in English or if it's just a pacer, but
No, yeah. I
yeah.
mean, actually it's interesting. It comes from like greyhound racing is they chase the hare. Like that is the
Hmm.
pacer. And yeah. So
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, so I was curious if it had any connection to that, but
No,
yeah,
but I like that. That's a good one. I might add that to
mhm.
the story. It's a good one.
Yeah, you should. Well, for the listeners who are now listening and wondering who we're talking to and who Matt Taylor is, who is Matt Taylor? Why don't you present yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm the founder, CEO of Tracksmith. And we are, entering year 11. And so, it's obviously been an amazing decade or so of work and time, and, super proud of the work that the team's been able to do and to establish this brand. But, I'm a runner at heart. I've been a runner my entire life. I started in team sports, as many American kids do, because running's not super popular and there's not a great youth infrastructure here. So you end up playing basketball, baseball, American soccer. As time went on, I still love team sports. In high school, I continued to play basketball all through high school, but you quickly realize when or the coaches realize when you're the fastest kid on the team, whatever sport that is. And so you get hey, why don't you come out for the track team? And so I found my way to running, really my beginning of my high school career, and only ran cross country that first year of high school. I still played basketball and baseball. And then as my high school career went on, I basically ran cross country and ran outdoor track, and fortunate enough to be able to run in college, and not quite good enough to continue competing at a high level after college, but still train and race as a master's now. And it's just obviously such a part of my identity, part of my lifestyle, and something that I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, I've seen that you're still competing, and I wanted to ask you, like, 'cause obviously you're saying that running is a big part of your life, and it has been. Uh, would you say that running has shaped you in a lot of ways?
For sure. I mean, I talk a lot about, or think a lot about, the thing that I really appreciate in my teens, was the ability to compete in both a very individual sport like running, where, cross country, there's absolutely a team element, but at the end of the day, it's a very individual pursuit. There's no ball or teammates or anything else that can be at play. It's kind of just you versus the clock. But also playing basketball and having a very team sport environment as well, where you do rely on the other four players on the court at any given time. And the contrast of those two, the tension of like those two, and how you kind of pursue them, and the approaches to them as an athlete, I really loved. And I feel like I've taken a lot from both of those. Basketball obviously requires, I was a point guard, so it required leadership on the floor. It required a sense of the game that the other players maybe didn't have to be thinking about all the time. So you're kind of the general on the floor. And so that was really interesting, and a lot that I took away from that. And then running, though, is like certainly has had the biggest impact. And, I think I appreciate the most just the time in your head that running gives you. And there's nothing that, it's really hard to explain, because I don't think you get it in a lot of other instances in life, of like pushing yourself to a point where in your head you want to stop so badly, but you also know you need to keep going. And those games that you play with yourself to like get through that is like, it's really character forming, and I think you come out of that just with like a quiet confidence that maybe in other activities and pursuits you don't quite get the same way. And so I think that's, that is kind of the, if you look at our sport and the stars of our sport, yes, there can be some bravado, but at the end of the day, they all know they'll be humbled at some point. Distance running, sprinting can be a little bit different, but distance running,
Yeah.
like, you're going to be humbled at some point. You're not going to have the day you wanted at some point. Someone's going to run faster than you at some point. And so it's just a really, I think, like a really powerful kind of experience to have in life.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's interesting what you're saying about that, like they seem more humble. After I started this podcast, it's been so easy to get runners on, and I've been a bit surprised by that.
Yeah.
I come from speed skating myself, and I know that although speed skating is a small sport, I know that it would not have been as easy getting the big stars to join a podcast the way I've been able to do with a lot of the best marathoners in the States. So yeah, that's I think you're right on that. And
Were you a sprinter or endurance?
I was
speed skater?
Endurance.
Endurance,
long,
okay.
long distance. Yeah. It's a very, very different sport than running. And I think I kind of realized a couple of years back when I found running myself that I probably should have started running earlier, because it felt like I had more of a talent there than I had as a skater. Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly some crossover for sure, but I mean, it's a great sport. I love it. In the Winter Olympics every 4 years, one of my favorite to watch. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. You did mention that you're competing now. Like, how competitive are you today with your running? Do you do it mostly just, to get out there, or are you still competing to get those faster times?
Still competing to get the faster times. I will say it's my ability to string together long stretches of great training and racing has been, something that frustrates me a bit. When as a younger athlete, rarely had injury, blessed to not sort of have to deal with injuries, much through college and after college. But really when I hit 40 is when like the wheels just started to come off. And so I spent the early part of my 40s just trying to like find a routine and an approach to training at a high level, high for me, and that sort of worked, and I had to readjust how I thought about it. I added a lot more strength and mobility and less mileage and all of that stuff. And so I've had some nice stretches. I'm 48 now and still running the mile to the marathon and some trail races and some other of these sort of unique, relay and other things. But, the mile, I still love. I love the symmetry of it and the accessibility of it and still love the marathon just because it's always a challenge and it's always something new. So still have some unfinished business in both of those areas.
And just for references, this is the Marathon Podcast. What is your PR on the marathon?
I ran 240 is my PR. I've only run Boston last year, 2 years ago, 2 Bostons ago was my third marathon. And I ran 243. My goal has been in my 40s to run my age, so 4 minutes plus my age in the mile and cool. 2 hours plus my age in the marathon. So when I was 47, I had to run 247, which I did. I ran 243 and I had to run 447 and I ran 437 in the mile that year. So
nice. Wow.
Still chugging along.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
And then I guess like as a runner, you have a great starting point when it comes to starting a running brand. How, like, if we go back a bit further, because I know that you were in Puma before you started working with Tracksmith and you were working with people or athletes like Usain Bolt. How, if you look at your career outside of running but in business, how did you get to Tracksmith? What was that journey like?
Yeah, winding, not a straight path by any stretch. I was very entrepreneurial from an early age. I grew up in a house of kind of entrepreneurs and small business owners and crafts people. And so I just was always surrounded by, a desire to like build something. And I didn't think about it as a kid. I did sold golf balls that I found in the pond and, did lemonade stands, all those things that you hear about, but really didn't think of it that way until much later. And when I was finishing up college, there's a business plan competition at school, and I wrote a business plan for a running magazine because at the time, late 90s, it was basically Runner's World and Running Times in the US. You had some different ones in Europe, but I felt like they weren't really covering the sport. It was more starting to move to like more health and wellness and And that didn't go anywhere. I tried to start that. It didn't really go anywhere. But so I started my career in sort of sports marketing, and at a big company called IMG, but then quickly decided to try to start a company with some friends, and it was modestly successful, but ultimately didn't go anywhere. And so that's when really I kind of more panicked than anything else, because I was a few years out of college and my friends were all, had great jobs working at like management consulting or investment banking and living this great life in New York City. And I'm like, eating ramen and Brussels sprouts, trying to figure out what to do. And, so I did finance for a little while. I did a lot of odd jobs, but eventually sort of found my way back to running specifically, and I started a series of projects where I was documenting world-class athletes. The first one I did, I guess you wouldn't call them world-class, but it was following the best collegiate, so U.S. college cross-country teams, and did a sort of mini documentary style approach to that at a time when none of that content existed on the internet. So it was a very small audience, but a very rabid one, because it was, again, content that no one had seen or had access to before. And that sort of led to someone else asking me to do a very similar project. But then at the time, some of the best Kenyan marathoners in the world, and the podium finishers at the majors, world record holder at a while, Evans Ruto. And so that was great, and learned a lot. And so I did a series of those projects for a period of time. And then, I guess ultimately that kind of maybe caught Puma's radar a little bit, and I got to be friends with some folks there. And so that when that role came open, that's sort of when I went in-house, went corporate, and so ended up at Puma for a little over 4 years before leaving to start Tracksmith.
How crucial would you say that those years were for you founding Tracksmith? Do you feel like that helped you in that way, or did it kind of just make you realize even more that you wanted to start something of your own?
You mean the Puma years?
Yeah, the Puma years, and
both.
Also the years of documenting. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but both had both sides, like the sort of more entrepreneurial storytelling, projects were really fun, exciting. I learned a lot about sort of storytelling and what resonated with consumers and what didn't, and things that I went in thinking really changed my mind on certain things, and so I learned a lot. But it was also really hard. I did everything by myself for most of those. As time went on, I was able to sort of hire some additional resources to help, but so I was like, God, going to like a stable job, having a desk and all that stuff was lovely at the time. So Puma was like, maybe my real world MBA. I learned a lot in that role and tried to absorb as much as I could, but at the same time also kind of reminded me, why I didn't want to work in a big company, and enjoyed a little bit more of the freedom to execute and be able to make decisions more quickly and try things. And so got to a point eventually where I felt like, the time was right again. Starting a business as a brand is people don't talk about timing as much. It's usually these crazy stories of, founders and, some like discovery or thought in the shower, but like timing is really critical because it's a big risk financially. You can't, unless you're well off or have some, backstop, it's like you're taking a risk. So there's times like early in my career when I was 23, I didn't mind. I could do it, and I did, and it failed, and it wasn't a huge, loss. I just kind of moved on. Then there was that time in the middle where it wouldn't have made sense, and I needed that stability that a Puma would provide. But my wife and I got to a point where we were in a position where like, okay, we can try again. I'm gonna take this risk and see where it goes. And so the timing was right, and so left and started plugging away.
Yeah, that's I find this to be very inspiring. I'm self-employed myself, and I get that question a lot in terms of the risks of starting something, and obviously it's starting. I'm a filmmaker and photographer, so I needed a camera when I started, and
Yeah.
I didn't have to invest that much, not that many expenses, so it's a bit easier. But still, I think that I do realize when I look back that it takes quite a lot of courage to make that decision
Yeah.
and just be
Yeah.
like, okay, now I'm gonna do this. But I also feel like if you have that dream, it's gonna kind of haunt you forever if you don't. So
For
it's
sure. For sure.
it's crucial to make that decision, but it's also really hard.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
no, I agree.
and what fascinates me about Tracksmith is that if you look at a lot of other brands in terms of the style, Tracksmith is very unique, right?
Mhm.
I love it. We briefly talked about it before we started recording in terms of the New England style. You have more like that New England prep style, I guess you
Mhm.
could call it. Um, where did those ideas come from? Because like coming from Puma, or if you can call it the corporate sports world, it's so much more about, I would say, maybe looking fast,
Yeah.
whilst Tracksmith just looks really cool and exclusive in my eyes, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was 100% a strong style component to what we wanted to create. And you said it looked fast. It's a really good the example I think about the most back to those days, and when I was going into all the running shops and looking at all the garments, the thing that everyone was doing at the time was, and you probably remember this, you'd have a gray t-shirt, and they would use fluorescent yellow thread to sew this, the shoulder seam here and up across here. And it literally was zero functional benefit, but it was this like fake perception of something's going on. It's like fake technology,
Yeah.
and which is totally fine. I mean, that was the style and stuff at the time, but it was like, okay, when I look at how I dress to go about the rest of my day, none of this product looks anything else like how I care to dress for everything else. And of course, style is very personal, but there was a very, I would call it techie, futuristic, but also like of the moment aesthetic in running at the time. Meaning, like, if you looked back, again, early 2000s, like you could look at something and be like, okay, that was from 2004. That was the hot color of 2004.
Exactly.
That was
Yeah.
2008. That was, whatever. And then the brands that more appealed to me were timeless. They yes, they'd have their moments where they were more popular, adopted a little bit more mainstream, but they always had this sort of baseline consistency. And so trying to bring that aesthetic, and yes, a lot of that is a very understated, timeless, again, quiet confidence of, the prep New England, like, the prep has had its, again, peaks when it's peaking again now, but it never goes away. It never dies, just because it's easy to wear. It's, it's simple, timeless, high quality, very durable, it lasts for a long time. And so those were the attributes that we wanted to bring into running, which at the time didn't exist. Again, the other big piece of it was like, despite that, show of, oh, look what we're doing, the reality is that product was falling apart so quickly. You wear and wash it, heavily for 2 months, 3 months, and it's pilling, the threads are coming out. And, we had this amazing line when we launched, because we launched with a cotton t-shirt, which, the cotton's not for every day, but certainly there's a place for cotton. It was the idea that, like, no one ever falls in love with polyester. And it's true. Like, the pieces you hold on to and you hand down and you steal from your parents' closet are generally natural fibers. They're usually cottons and wools and different things, because they just last longer, and they wear in over time rather than sort of wearing out. A great canvas or leather duffel bag, these things that just sort of stand the test of time, are kind of what we wanted to bring into it. So yes, there was definitely a strong aesthetic and style component to the brand.
And I was watching, or I've been reading books about Steve Prefontaine lately, and so when I was telling my fiance's mom about Tracksmith and the style, I was kind of saying, yeah, like it looks a lot like what Steve Prefontaine was running.
Yeah, yeah.
And she was like, oh, I don't remember that name, so I don't know. But I was like, I feel like that is the case. I don't, like you said, style comes and goes in a lot of ways. But right now, at least, I feel like going back to that style is very trendy. But
Yeah.
then you have Tracksmith, and you guys have been around now for 10 years, and 10 years is usually much longer than like a single trend lasts
Yeah.
for, right?
Yeah.
So when you started Tracksmith, did you feel like, I just want to make something that I like, that you like and that you believe in, and hope that the market would adapt to that? Or did you feel very confident that everyone would love that style?
I mean, a little bit of both. I mean, I think you never think, we I guess maybe specifically have, not set out to create a brand that appeals to everyone, because you end up making a lot of compromises to do that, whether that's around style or price point or distribution channels or whatever the case may be, marketing, So we had a very clear, I think, point of view on that, and who we were, wanted to communicate to and build relationships with. Um, but there was like, yes, it's like it's weird because at the time, actually, there was a bit of a resurgence then, and we weren't a reaction to it, but it was happening kind of simultaneously. But then I don't know if it really reached its peak, but it's been simmering, and now is like coming back up again. So you're right that usually these things don't last for extended periods of time, but oddly, there was a moment back then, and there seems to be kind of another moment coming now. So maybe this is like a double peak kind of moment for it. So, but again, it's less trying to like say this is trying to catch, prep, and more classic and timeless, and whether that's through color palettes or designs or whatever the case may be, fabric choices, just product that's gonna look great now, and it's gonna look great 20 years from now, versus trying to chase whatever that current look is. There are brands that can do that really well for short periods of time, but it's really hard to do it consistently for long periods of time because it just moves so quickly. So
Yeah, and I also feel like it's an important part what you're saying about the quality, because that's one thing that I've noticed, at least with my Tracksmith gear, is that it looks new still, right? Like I've worn it a lot, I've washed it a lot, and it still looks really nice. And I also feel like in a lot of ways, it's hard to combine style with being, one thing, maybe comfortable, but also like performance in terms of combining that style, vintage New England style, with also being fast and a product that people actually will wear when they go out to run fast.
Yep.
And I'm curious about how you approached that when you guys started making the products, of still keeping that style and still producing products that people are like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to wear for my next marathon.
Yeah, it is challenging. It's a tension that exists there. And there's maybe two primary sort of things that I think we've done a good job at. One is raw material selection. So, using the best ingredients that we can, whether that's in a shoe or a short or a top, goes a long way, because fabrics and materials do have a significant impact. And again, not necessarily on, always will say, if it's 55 degrees and you're running for 30 minutes, you really can run in anything. That's why I like the Gray Boy. I like a cotton t-shirt, because, I know it's going to be there reliably over and over, and it's not going to hinder my performance. But if I'm going 2 hours and it's 70 degrees, I'm not going to pick that cotton t-shirt. I'm going to choose something that's going to be a little bit better in those conditions. And so just the material selection can have a really important impact on it. And again, then how do you do that in a way that doesn't shout about it and still keeps that classic look? And that's sort of the challenge, the second piece of it, which often becomes more a exercise in restraint rather than addition. And if you look at our product, it's, we have, not every product is exactly the same or follows some exact formula. We have a range, but like the bulk of our product is, it's pretty streamlined. It's pretty simple. It doesn't, and in an industry, at least on the footwear side, for decades, the addition of more things on the shoe was creating perceived value, but there was no functional value to it. And you look at like shoes that have tons of overlays and, tons of different, elements and graphics. It's like a lot of theater. At the end of the day, what could you actually take away from that and still perform at the same level or even better, but then in an aesthetic that just felt more restrained? So like if you can combine those things, I think you can build a highly technical performance product that also has a less technical and less shouty aesthetic to it.
Yeah. Do you find it hard to kind of stay true to that New England style? Like, is it sometimes tempting to kind of go a little bit away from that and be like, oh, this would have been cool too? Because obviously now you're an established brand, so people would probably still buy it, right? But then you would maybe kind of, I don't know. Is that hard?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like we do it. New England is a really important part of our brand. It plays a critical role, but it's not required in everything that we do, right? We show up at races outside New England. We sponsor athletes outside of New England. We tell stories about races, places, people outside of New England. We're a global brand with a global footprint. But we draw inspiration from our home is really how we think about it. So even in our line, there are, pieces, that, like the Bislett pants as an example, it's literally inspired by an old product that, a friend of mine had created a company based off Bislett stadium and the Bislett games, and his brand was told that story, and it didn't exist any longer, but we kind of like were able to kind of take some of what he created and build that into the product. That's obviously not a New England story, and it's a deep winter running pant. Yes, works in Boston, but would work just as well in the winter in the Nordics, right? And so so it's but if you look at it aesthetically, it's still quite an understated product, so maybe people would look at that and go, oh, it's a continuation of New England, when actually the story and inspiration behind it is not. So not a lot of temptation to go wild with graphics and colors or other things like that, but we do look for inspiration outside of New England as well.
Yeah. And you did mention that you were doing like small documentary pieces and stuff, so that means that you were kind of into the content creation pretty early on. Are you still hands-on kind of on some of those things when it comes to the campaigns or the content that Tracksmith is doing today?
Yeah, certainly. The big difference is back then when I was doing those projects, I did film, photography, and writing, and I was like below average at all three of them. But again, no one was doing it, and the combination of the three made for something compelling for that niche audience. But now I have the luxury of being able to work with incredible photographer and director and writers, and but yes, like a lot of we'll never say it's everything's been my idea, because it hasn't, but I'm very involved in the narrative that we tell within a season or within a launch, the photography, like how that comes to life, what we're going to shoot and how we're going to portray that, and the films as well. But I just have extremely talented people that I get to work with on that now.
Cool. And what is it that you enjoy the most in terms of the process of everything that you do in Tracksmith and your role as the CEO? Like, what are you the most excited about?
I still do love that part. I mean, I really enjoy, like as an example, 2 years ago now, I guess we did this film called Church of the Long Run, and it
Yeah, I
was
was gonna
a
mention that.
83-minute film that just followed a woman doing a long run in Colorado. And it was an idea that our photographer and director, Emily May, and I had for a long time, for years. I mean, we've worked together 11, 12 years now on this. And we always talked about it. And then finally, it's just like, we just got to do this idea. Like we both feel, we keep coming back to it. We feel really passionate about it. And it was internally, people were like, what? Like, what? Why would we create a 83-minute, ad basically film? And but I felt a pretty strong conviction that, well, one, no one else would do it. Two, it really represents our brand because it showcases the commitment and the effort that goes into what we produce. I've been on 1,000 photo shoots with other brands that are, I'm not saying there's not effort that goes into it, but not the same effort. It's more the effort of the crew and the team that you bring in to create it than the athletes. The athletes oftentimes are jogging back and forth, posing in a position, being make-upped and sweat, like fake sweat and all that stuff. And we've created a process where we ask the athletes to put in the effort, and so do we, to capture it, but just really represented what we stand for. And so like things like that, I still love when I feel like we can create something, whether that's a marketing campaign, a product, an event concept that feels like a great representation of the brand. That's still what I get the most excited about.
Yeah, as a filmmaker myself, one of the things I think that I appreciate the most about Tracksmith's content is that it doesn't seem like you kind of bought into that all social media hype of like hooks and fast edits just to satisfy the viewer on Instagram. It's more like you sit down and you find a time to actually watch this. Obviously, it doesn't need to be that 80-minute long run, but it could also be that minute and a half piece of art, in my opinion, in terms of the storytelling and in terms of showing that. And it's so easy to kind of relate to it. And so it might be that less people end up seeing it because they're just scrolling past it, but the people who will see it will probably be left with more of a good impression and be able to relate more to it.
Yeah, that's 100% right. It absolutely will create a stronger emotional response and connection, but fewer of those for sure, because it's, you either play to the algorithm or you don't. And sometimes you do, you have to, it's a business and it can't all just be art projects, but when you can combine art with commerce, obviously is when things get really interesting. So, but yeah, I'm glad you appreciated that film.
No, yeah, definitely. I think you guys are doing a great job on that. I do want to talk a bit more about the shoes you guys are producing and like diving into that.
Yeah.
But before I ask you that, I just want to ask a question about, when you hire someone to Tracksmith in terms of like the employees and the values of Tracksmith, what does like a typical Tracksmith employee look like? And I'm not obviously talking about it in terms of the looks, but more like the values.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a lot of consistency over the 10 years, but there's also a little bit of difference when you start and you're a brand like Tracksmith and you're trying to get those first employees, to join you and kind of like, be like, yeah, okay, there's not a lot here yet, but let's do it. Like you're definitely attracting more really passionate runners, the people that came out of the woodwork first and raised their hand to be like, I want to be a part of this. They like resonated with that in some deep way. But as time's gone on, we've matured as a business and we need, specialists in certain areas. Not everyone sort of has that, let's just say like same lifelong runner out there running, every day and doing workouts and racing like that. You're never going to be able to find that many people who are also great at their jobs and what you need. So, but I think everyone has a passion for the industry has a passion for fitness in general. They're active people, really smart people. So yeah, there's no singular, thing there. But I also think, talked about this a little bit, like runners by nature of the sport um, I would say, it's a broad generalization, but like pretty, I don't know, like pragmatic, humble, kind. Like
Yeah.
you go to a starting line of a marathon, and it's like the nice, like everyone's friendly, everyone's about to suffer. They have the experience of that shared suffering. Although you're sharing separately and individually, the person's going through the same thing. There's something really unique about that, and I can imagine it like, I don't know, some other brands that maybe are into other sports that are, maybe more explosive, more, speed based or power based. You probably have like a personality that relates, and so here it's, I don't know, it's just such like wonderful people.
Yeah, I
So
agree. And I also feel like, the I guess that's part of it, but you guys are also creating this community by, uh, like just by wearing something from Tracksmith, for instance. You feel like
mhm.
you're part of something, and I've been into your store in Boston several times, and people are very friendly and nice, and you can genuinely feel like if you're out of the stock of, like, I was gonna buy a jacket and it was like you didn't have any left in my size, and you can really tell how genuinely sorry they
Yeah.
were. It wasn't just to be polite. It was like they were genuinely sorry about it.
Yeah.
How important has that part been of creating that community, and what would you say is like the secret to creating that community? Because that's so important, but still not super easy.
Yeah. I mean, when uh, I don't want to say that community has become like a buzzword, but it sort of has been overused
Hmm.
in running and everything, right? Like the idea of brands that build community, like, but what was unique when we started was it was just very organic. Like we all wanted to run. And so we started, okay, we're going to run at lunchtime together, or we're going to go to the track after work. And hey, do you want to meet up on the weekend? And literally within the first year, we were doing a few different workouts that were employees and friends of the brand that
Yeah.
wanted to be a part of that. We were doing this thing called Half on the Half, which the halfway point of every month we would run a half marathon together. It was just,
Nice.
and the reason we did that, our first office was literally at the halfway point of the Boston Marathon, so we had this sort of connection to the halfway point. And so it kind of grew from there, and this was the earliest of like run crews, and the culture that has now expanded and grown like crazy, and that and didn't really yet exist in the way that it does today. But for us, it felt very natural, because we all wanted to go for a run. We wanted to work out on Wednesdays at the track after work, so we were just inviting people to come into that and experience that. And then the other big piece of it, combine that, which was like very organic for our team here. But then, racing is such a unique experience, and it's not for
Yeah.
everybody, and doesn't matter how fast you run, but like to go through the effort of, going to train and getting through that, and the ups and the downs, and then putting it all on the line on race day, regardless of the result. Like there's something very special about that we love. And so we started early showing up at the big races and
Yeah.
creating these experiences around them that didn't exist at the time. Now,
Hmm.
come to the Boston Marathon, and where we did our very first pop-up, every other brand is on the street now doing the,
Yeah.
roughly the same thing we are. But, we did that early. And again, it wasn't, we weren't going in strategically, okay, community is a thing that you need to build. It was just like
Yeah.
organic, like, hey, we're Boston Marathons in our back door. Some of our employees are running, what are we going to do? And so it's been really important, but it's also been, I guess, a little bit more just a kind of organic expression of the brand. in real life. That's the other thing, I guess. The other big element of that is, when you launch as a mostly e-commerce brand, all of your interactions are virtual, and running is not a virtual sport. It's a human sport. And, and it's best when you get to do it with other people. And so how were we as a, www.tracksmith.com going to activate in the real world? And so it was being out there again in the community, doing workouts, doing long runs, showing up at the events and all those things.
Yeah, and I do also feel like when you were referring to the Boston Marathon, so I did Boston this spring, and although you had the other pop-ups next to you, right? There's nothing like going down to you guys into the into Tracksmith, and I feel like and I don't mean to name drop maybe one of your competitors in Bandit, but like you two, like Bandit and Tracksmith, I feel like you kind of solved that better than anyone else in terms of that community of feeling, like what you had with the posters you were able to get your time stamp on.
Yeah.
Just like those small little things that will make you feel a bit more special, more welcome. So, and also I remember like buying this hoodie, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a cheap one.
No.
And you have to kind of invest to get this one. And so when I first walked in, because I couldn't, obviously it wasn't available online. And when I first walked in, I was like, oh, I'm going to get that.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, that's pricey. I don't think I'm getting it. And I walked away and I was gone for maybe like an hour. And I was like, told my fiance, hey, I have to go back. I need to get that hoodie.
Yeah.
But also then when you're, you got this, what do you call them? Patches or
patches.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure, is it Sam, his name, the one that you're sponsoring, Sam Pearson?
Parsons.
Parsons. Yeah. I'm pretty sure he was standing outside there at that point. And I just remember feeling so seen, like I felt like I was valued. And obviously, you could argue that is also like a way of doing business, but it seems super sincere, and it really feels like you're part of something bigger that I definitely don't get by walking into, say, a Nike store in Boston, although they are still trying to probably create that community that we're talking about. So I agree that the term community is probably overused, but I do still feel like you guys are succeeding more in creating that, and that's a real community compared to the community that the big commercial. I don't know if that's right to call them the big commercial brands, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I do, and I think you mentioned something that is I still think like one of the best representations of our ethos is the posters. So we did that. The very first marathon pop up in 2014 in New York, and then 15 in Boston were our first two marathons. And, it's a limited edition poster. It's, it's specific to that race. The design is specific to the race in the year, and they're free. And anyone can come in after the race and get their time hand stamped on it. And, you can take that home and frame it or do whatever you want with it. But what I always tell our employees is it is the best experience that you can have as an employee at Tracksmith with a customer, because you don't, as a brand, get that opportunity where you're across the table from the customer having just completed a huge milestone. Again, very few runners actually are thrilled with they always want better, right? Even if you PR, you're like, I could have run a minute faster if I just would have done X, Y, and Z, right? So, but this really special moment, you get this intimate interaction with them where you're asking them about the race and, and where are they in from and who's with you here today, and all of that stuff. And it's not commercial. We're not selling anything. We're trying to have one real, organic, authentic moment with the customer in what is one of the most memorable experiences that they'll have. And so that's something that we do at all the races. And, I try to encourage every employee to, when they're signing up for shifts for the marathons, like do a poster stamping shift, like spend an hour across from these customers stamping their poster, and you'll walk away being like, wow, this is really special. So I'm glad you mentioned the posters.
Yeah. And another thing that I appreciated was, because obviously qualifying for the Boston Marathon is a big deal, and to a lot of people, I think most people qualifying, they will kind of see it as almost like the achievement of a lifetime.
Yeah.
And I remember I was so excited when I realized that you had this BQ25, the singlet that you could buy, and you actually had to prove that you qualified. I had to upload my I don't remember what it was, but I had to upload something to kind of prove that I qualified and that I was in. And that is also something that I appreciate. I did see that you had it in the stores on the marathon weekend, so people could still buy it, but it's there will always be a limit to how many people actually qualified for the Boston Marathon, right?
Yeah.
So with that, you're kind of providing us, the group of people who qualified, with a product that is not really accessible to everyone else. And that is something I also think that is really appreciated, because you feel more special, right? It feels like you guys were thinking about us when you did it. And I was having my workouts on the treadmill, but I don't think I've ever been as proud when running with that singlet the weeks and months leading up to Boston.
Well, that's great to hear, because it's it has created a bit of controversy. You know, there are people that, you know, do think it is you know, I don't know, exclusive, which it is by nature, but also we sell other things for you know, it's not, we're not excluding anyone. Anyone's welcome through our doors marathon weekend, but celebrating that achievement, which, to your point, for a non-elite runner, it is one of the, it's almost the gold standard for an amateur marathoner, you know. And whether that's right or wrong, whether you want to argue about should Boston, you know, lower the standards, let more people race, all of those things. Like we didn't create the race, but this achievement has existed for 100 years, you know, and at more, the Boston Marathon's 120, almost 30 years. And the BQ has come to represent like that achievement. And a lot of people spend a lot of time and money and effort training year after year to try to get that. So to be able to celebrate that with those folks is really special, as well as it is. I mean, we always say this, we stamp as many 4-hour, 5-hour marathon posters as we do 2- and 3-hour marathon posters, maybe more. And we treat those people all the same, and the celebration is the same regardless of the time. But doing that little special thing for the BQ has always been just a nice thing that we enjoy. Yeah,
no, I really appreciate that. And then we have the shoes that you guys started selling, and I remember when I first saw it, I was like, oh yeah, another brand who's kind of just starting to produce shoes because everything else is going well. And then I remember reading about it and I got the impression that this was not just something that you were doing. This was like a real investment into the shoe industry, and something that you really want to succeed with.
Yeah.
And obviously this is hard when you have other brands. Like, if I'm brutally honest, I would say that I'm always skeptical when there are brands that haven't really worked with those things before that come out on the market with those things. But that being said, I'm like, the Elliot or like your models are still probably the shoes that I'm most curious to actually try on.
Yeah.
But I've felt like it's a little bit risky.
Yeah.
And then I felt like it was less risky when I read about your thoughts about it and the future of this.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you can kind of like tell me a little bit about how that came to life, and also what your plans and goals are for this going forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing to maybe mention is that footwear was always part of the plan at Tracksmith. I can look back at the pitch decks that we used in the business plan I put together, and footwear was there. I thought it would come much sooner because entrepreneurs are naive and optimistic, and footwear is hard. It takes longer and takes more money than apparel. And so for me, it was just always a question of when rather than would we or if, you know. And we started years ago, and you know, I've been honest about this. We had 2 or 3 failed attempts at footwear. We tried to do it both internally and externally, and it just didn't get to the standard that we were comfortable putting out, for that exact reason that, like, you know, footwear's gear, you know, it's the thing that, you know, you're willing to take a shot on a pair of shorts, but come race day, like you need to know that the product's going to work, and that it's been validated in some capacity. And so it just was hard to get there, but we finally had the team in place and were able to, launch the first shoe, the Elliott Runner. And it is, it's an everyday trainer. It's kind of down the middle. It's trying to meet runners where they spend most of their mileage was the idea for the first shoe. So not coming out with a racer or trail shoe or something, like let's go right down the middle. Now we have 3 shoes in the market. There's more coming. It's certainly, the area that we're extremely excited about internally. And the thing that I think the difference with footwear is that it does take time. It will take us longer to, again, we have the advantage of having 10 years of history. So at least we're not starting as no one even knows the brand. Mm-hmm. People know the brand. Now we're asking them to try another product category. And we bring a lot of the same approach to footwear that we do to apparel. It's premium materials, best in class materials that we can get, a relatively restrained aesthetic and style, and package those things together into a product that performs really well but also looks really good. And I think we've done a great job. Obviously, you as a product person, as a creative person, soon as you do something, you want to make it better. You already are like, you don't want to put the pencil down, you want to keep tinkering and going. But the validation for me, I mean, sales are good. Like the response has been positive for sure. We have a long ways to go. The thing that gives me the, I guess, most like satisfaction in our approach is I know a lot of people in the footwear industry that have been making shoes for decades, and without fail, when I talk to those people who have tried the shoe, they're like, for a first shoe, this is extremely good, and they'll point to examples of other brands that are very big and the first shoes that they launched and how bad they were, the fit, the feel, the ride. And so we've got the pieces for sure to make footwear a really big and compelling part of our brand and our story, and we're just taking our time, and refining and tweaking as we go and listening to feedback. And but I'm really excited, and just before we got on, I was looking at shoe number 4, and
Nice.
I'm very optimistic about it. So
yeah, I need to get a few of those and try them on, because it's like you said, what in terms of the design of them, you have a lot of the super shoes today, and they're not necessarily the most good-looking shoes. They might be fast, but that's where I feel like you guys are actually obviously I can't say without having tried them on, but based on what you're saying, you are able to combine that performance with style and not looking like a super modern spaceship or whatever.
Exactly.
We are. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, the super shoe race, the arms race there, which is, I mean, great. It's created a lot of excitement in the category and stuff. But it's very reminiscent of the apparel in 15 years ago when I started thinking about Tracksmith. It's it is a lot of theater, and the basics of what are making the shoes faster are actually just the raw materials. It's the foams plus the carbon plate plus the geometry, and everything else is superfluous. It's design theater to make these things look like something else, and it works. I mean, people, you design something that looks fast, people are going to think it's fast. And so, but okay, could we take a different approach than that and strip some of that away, still stick with the same formula that's making the shoes faster, but do it in a silhouette that subjectively in our mind, like slightly better looking. So
yeah, and you did mention that people can buy a pair of shorts or a t-shirt, whatever, and it's not like it's gonna really, that's not what's gonna make it or break it when it comes to the performance. Whilst with shoes, you could argue that could be the case. And so in terms of the marketing and in terms of getting the shoes out there, because what you will probably have to do is convince the market to kind of just try them on. It's not necessarily about realizing, or like it's not necessarily about showing that, oh, this person did this in them. We all need to just try them on and see it for ourselves, and then we will be convinced, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of the strategy for marketing, do you see it as like, do you have to approach this differently than when you started with the clothing, for instance?
Yeah, there definitely is I would say a higher barrier for digital footwear purchase in a performance product than there is for apparel. And so, when we started, we were e-com only. But, really quickly you would hear from people that I just want to like touch it and feel it or try it on before I make a purchase. And now we have 3 stores. We show up at a lot of the major races and even in the US, a lot of the smaller regional races. We have some wholesale partners. And so just to your point, how can we create more opportunities for people to actually touch and feel and try on the product, whether footwear or apparel? But with footwear especially, it is a higher bar to clear. And so it really is a combination of that accessibility to the product to be able to try it on. Yes, we can do, we have a 100-mile guarantee. Any of our shoes, you can run up to 100 miles. If you don't like it, just send it back. Like that helps people, okay, if it's not right for me, or I just don't like the color, like, no, you can send it back, because for us, it's, yeah, we'll have a few returns come back, but like, how do we get people to try the shoe and trust that we're making a great product? But there is also, some athlete validation, but for us, it's less about the, athletes maybe winning races or setting world records at that elite level, but it's that next category down that is likely very influential in their local communities and their cities. Yeah. They're winning local races or podium, or, and so you do want that validation, if oh, that guy's running fast times. Put it this way, if someone's running fast times in the shoe, it may not be like, oh, I'm definitely buying that shoe, but it definitely erases, oh, it's a bad product, Yeah, so when you see that, there is a little bit of that validation, like, okay. And the reality with super shoes, as you, I'm sure, know, there is still a lot of individual biomechanical variation. And I actually think the elite athletes who are sponsored are in really tough situations, because it is true that some shoes do not work well for certain biomechanics and others will. You're kind of forced into like, okay, I've got to go with this brand shoe. So we know the race, I'm talking specifically like the carbon plated, where you are getting clear benefit. It won't work for everyone, and no shoe ever will work for everyone. And so, but we feel really good about the response that we've had, both all of our athletes, but also the customers that are running in it. It's been overwhelmingly positive. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the athletes, because that was I wanted to ask you about that, because that's kind of the best validation you can have. And I've been thinking about this with a lot of products in the running world, that there are some products that you're like, oh yeah, they're sponsored by them and they can advertise for them. But then there are some things like watches or shoes that that if it doesn't work, they wouldn't use it, because it's such an important tool in their training. And if they're competitive, they would never sacrifice that just to get money, because long term that would also lead to less money. All of that, however you would argue. So I know that you are sponsoring some athletes. We already mentioned Sam. What does that sponsorship look like? Is that like groups, individual athletes? What does it look like?
It's a bit of a mix. I'll tell you the sort of the evolution of it, and then kind of where it is now. When we started, the first kind of, like, I would say, big investment, although from a cash perspective was not a lot because we didn't have a lot, but we started a program called the OTQ, Olympic Trials Qualifier, leading up to the 2020 Olympics, which ended up being in 2021, obviously, because of COVID. But the Olympic marathon trials in the US happened in February of 2020. And we had a few employees, we had athletes in our local community, friends of the brand elsewhere, that either had the standard or were chasing that standard. And as you know, outside of the BQ, the next pinnacle is for elite amateurs to make. In the US, the Olympic trials qualifier is a really big deal, because you get to get on the starting line, even though you know you have no shot of making the Olympic team. It's like, I was an Olympic trials qualifier. It's a big deal, big badge. We said, how can we just support these people? And so we put together this program, got some gear, got a little, some other brands we brought in so they could get some product from other brands. And what happened was, we started with 10 people in the program. And then that first weekend went by after we announced it, where there was a big regional marathon, and 15 people got the standard and immediately applied to the program. And then the next weekend, and another big batch, boom, boom, boom. And then you get to the Olympic trials in Atlanta. It's still one of the like proudest moments for me in Tracksmith is we had 125 or so athletes, in the kit, out of 500. So 25% of the field was in Tracksmith apparel. We didn't have footwear at the time, and we put them all in the same kit. It was extremely visible on course, and it was like, wow, how did we do that? And it's a small thing. Not everyone's watching the Olympic marathon trials. I'm not saying that's, the Super Bowl, but it was a big moment in the industry of kind of coming out for us of like, oh, okay, they're getting into athletes. And that evolved to the amateur support program, which extended to track and field. We had a similar experience at the Olympic trials for track and field, leading into 2021. And so that program is let's call that our kind of pinnacle sports marketing and athlete approach. Surrounded by that, we do sponsor and work with a lot of clubs, from the Central Park Track Club to the Peninsula Distance Track Club and on the West Coast, and a lot in between. And so there's some teams components, but really all of that has, led to what we just announced recently, which is our Stomata program, which is a women's marathon program. And it's led by Steph Bruce, who has had an incredibly long career, starting on the tracks and then the roads and the marathons. And so she's kind of the mentor and of the group. And basically what we've done is, we've put out this call for women who are trying to get the standard. And we had almost 200 applications. And we'll narrow that down to a small group of women in the program, and they'll go to training camps in Flagstaff, where Steph is, probably up in Vermont at this camp that we use a lot. Picking one race in the spring and the fall, where we'll have pacers right on the OTQ time. So like a big group of women can run together. Obviously they're together now, feel like a part of a team, communication wise, probably have like Slack channels or something where they're, dropping in questions and just supporting each other. And so it's a great program. Really excited about it, and we'll build content around that. And it'll be kind of a multi-year program leading up to the 2028 Olympics.
Wow, it's really cool to hear. I love the way you're giving back to the community. It's nice,
Yeah.
It's I'm sure it means a lot to the runners, and yeah, proud to have that here on their chest.
Yeah. I mean, it's, when the number one feedback we got from that very first program, which is what gave us the insight to continue and to expand and evolve what we're doing there, is, a lot of athletes, when they leave the collegiate system in the US, they don't really feel a part of a team anymore, and they miss that. It's such the team aspect of collegiate cross country and track and field is really strong. And so that first one, it was like, oh my God, I just felt like I was on a team again. And I'm out on the course and someone comes by and they're in the Tracksmith kit, and it's like, hey, let's work together for the next few miles. It's like I have a teammate out here, which most people don't feel like as elite or sub-elite runners. They feel they don't have that. Yes, there's some groups popping up, but you kind of lose that camaraderie of a team. And so that's been a really important element of it, and what kind of has driven that evolution. The reality is we don't have the budgets to go sign Jakob, or go sign Yared Nuguse, or go sign Josh Kerr, and so this is our the strategy that works for us within our means, and but also punches way above its weight, and so it's worked well for sure.
Yeah. How is it for you? You did mention that, like, this proud moment, but now if you go to a big marathon, or if you go, I was even watching this Netflix movie the other day with Owen Nelson. Is that what his name? It's about basketball players with Down syndrome.
Champions.
And yeah,
Champions.
and
Yeah, and he's wearing the
this guy
singlet.
was wearing the
Yes.
singlet. I was like, that is really cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, there must be so many of those proud moments for you where you see this little baby of yours everywhere, people wearing it. And yeah, how does that make you feel? It must be surreal.
It is. I think I don't allow myself probably as much as I should, and also probably don't let the team, kind of rest on it, or I'm trying to be better about like taking the time to really celebrate the wins as a company, because the early days you're just like, you're on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. But there's been some moments. I mean, I remember, in the beginning, we would call it seeing Tracksmith in the wild, would be like seeing it, while you're out for a run on somebody that you don't know. In the beginning, it was like, I know that person. I gave them that product,
Yeah.
that's my, my neighbor's friend, but then the first couple times you see it, in the wild was really special. And then you'd travel to New York or go over to London or something and see it in the wild there. And like those moments were really cool. Now, I mean, you can't run in Boston on the river and not see, multiple Tracksmith pieces along the way. So that has worn off a little bit. But then we've had, like Harry Styles ran the Tokyo Marathon in it. And, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and she can't believe that Harry Styles wore Tracksmith,
But
so
is that a collab, or is that just random? So you were just surprised. What about in Champions, the movie?
Totally
Did you know
surprised.
about it?
No, totally
That
surprised. I remember someone sent me an email or text and said, "Hey, you should check out the trailer of this movie. I swear this kid's wearing one of your singlets." And sure enough, I went and watched the trailer, and I was like, yes, that is. So yeah, it's popped up here and there. There's a famous show here called Survivor, one of these reality TV shows, and the past season, one of the contestants was in a singlet the whole time, and
Awesome.
they don't use brands, so they pulled off
Blur it
the
out.
hair, they ripped off the woven label, but the sash they're not going to cover the sash, because so that's a nice, for us, a nice element that we can tell it's a Tracksmith product without a logo. So yeah.
Cool. We're getting closer to the end of our conversation here, but there's one thing that I wanted to ask you about is you just recently launched for the trails.
Yeah.
And I did read that, like when it comes to ultra or in the trails, there's a different kind of community attitude towards new brands coming in.
Yes.
And is that like intimidating to dive into that segment of running, and how has it been received so far?
Yeah, I mean, mixed, but not intimidating. I mean, okay, there was a little bit of Instagram backlash or critique, which is totally fair.
And you will always get that.
You will always get that. And the thing that I always kind of like gives me a little bit of peace in those moments is like, if you look at the body of work of Tracksmith, yes, you could pull any one thing out and critique it about something, but usually that critique falls apart as soon as you look at the full breadth of what we've done. So whether that's, whatever, the BQ thing is elitist. Okay, but we also stamp posters for free for anyone that wants to walk in the door, right? So I lets me sleep at night, right? I know that that's not who we are, but yeah, in anything, you can always pull one thing. So trail, we've been doing trail forever. We've had an off-roads collection. It's, for us, it hasn't been maybe as technical and targeted as the recent collection we've launched, but one of the very first shoots we ever did was in Marin County in San Francisco, which is one of the best trail running locations in the world. We were running on the trails, we didn't have the trail shoe at the time because we didn't have any shoes. So but the big thing that surprised me, and it's fair, and maybe we'll take some of it on board in terms of how we progress next, but like there is there are certain areas in the world where your geography, you are blessed with beautiful, what we would consider iconic mountain range
Yeah.
trails, Chamonix, the Rockies in Colorado, whatever. The
Hmm.
vast majority of runners don't have that experience,
No,
but we
exactly.
all look for the trails wherever we
Yeah.
are, in Central Park. The athletes want to run on the bridle path in Central Park, not on the cement.
Yeah.
And here when I rarely run on concrete. Most of my runs from my home, I get on, dirt and some single track, some dirt road, whatever the case may be. So, I think this idea that like trail is a singular thing is really misguided. It's in the same way road like, is it marathons? Is it 5Ks? Is it miles? Or is it just training? And I think the vast majority of runners probably have a more mixed and hybrid experience of terrain, distance,
Mhm.
et cetera. And so, we wanted to create product that was going to work really well on the trail for, again, what the vast majority of people's experiences. It is a technical product. It's not a race day product. It's not the fastest trail shoe we could have made, but it's certainly a really, really, really good trail shoe. And, yeah, we, as a brand, we do shoot a lot in New England, and there's incredible trails, in
Yeah.
New England. And as just employees, we run them. We always do a company retreat, and a group of us will always go up early and run this incredible trail range in the Presidential Mountains. And so, it's yeah, the response is a little caught me off guard a little bit, but what I know is from the apparel to the footwear, in 11 years, it is some of the best product we've ever made. That's what I like. That's at the end of the day, I think great product will win, and it's easy to criticize something before you try it, but the product is spectacular. So I'm really excited about it. And the people that have been running in it, it's
Yeah.
been very positive response. So if you get past the initial yeah, faux outrage, you'll get to people that have actually tried the product and think it's great. So
Yeah, and personally, I'm a very much a like one brand kind of person. So like when I can I own different brands, but like if I go out for a run and if I have a raincoat from Tracksmith, then I want my pants. I want
yeah,
I want everything to be like. I don't like mixing brands, so
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
probably the perfect customer for any brand that I love, because they're like, if I buy the jacket, I need to buy the pants and
There
I
you
need to
go.
buy the shoes. You know.
If only everyone was like you, would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I do feel like with that, it also means that if I have a lot of products from Tracksmith already, then and I want to go out running on the trails and I feel like I'm missing a product, then it's genius to have
Yeah.
access to that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a big fan, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And trail is it's growing, and our hope is that the athletes that have always been running and racing trail continue to, but like you also, if you're in that industry, I mean not everybody, but like you would want the people that maybe haven't experienced it to also experience it, and so
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, I like it. Last question that I have for you, and that is kind of looking into the future. You have 10 years behind you or Tracksmith is 11 years old, and I would say that you kind of passed that mark where a lot of people would doubt the brand. It seems like you're here to stay.
Yeah.
What can people expect going forward, and where do you see Tracksmith say 5-10 years from now?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that the brand itself hopefully looks and feels and sounds the same way. That's not changing. I think oftentimes, whether it's, I don't know, an outsider, someone like, oh, why don't you guys get into, whatever, yoga or cycling or something else, and it's like, it's not for me.
No.
Not saying there's maybe not an opportunity there, but I only care about running, and that's what I want to continue to build. I think the difference is if you look out 5 to 10 years, hopefully would be, footwear being a really established part of our offering, and that being a much bigger piece of the brand. I would think that you would see more physical distribution, whether that's our own retail or more wholesale or whatever the case may be. But I think we, want to, continue to build brand awareness. We live in a bit of a bubble where you think any runner knows Tracksmith, and then you show up at a race at an expo and like, oh, have you heard of Tracksmith? No, never heard. What's this? And it's like, what? So there's still lots of room for growth and building awareness. And then the last piece, which is, more on the 5 to 10 horizon, but like running is really unique from a global perspective. There aren't a lot of like consumer categories where the hurdles for a consumer to discover a brand are so low. And a lot of that's because consumer behavior has changed tremendously in running. It used to be that you probably wouldn't leave, I don't know, Norway or a country or two nearby. I wouldn't go further than New York City or Philadelphia to run a race. And now our friends are getting on planes and flying to Tokyo and Berlin and Sydney and Copenhagen and Valencia. And so you have this like global consumer mindset that didn't exist previously. And then when you combine that with like Strava plus social media, it's just like gasoline on the consumer being able to discover brands, discover their communities, their tribes, the people that think like they do. And so it's a really unique opportunity, but growing a global business is complex. It's hard to do. And so I think about that a lot, but also temper that because I just don't think we're ready to like go crazy. We have a store in London, and that's been a really big step for us to sort of plant that flag in the sand to say we are a global brand. We have global ambitions, but the reality is it's going to take us some time before a customer in Oslo or Melbourne or Tokyo can experience the brand in the exact same way someone can in New York or California, whether that's language, whether that's price and cost, because it's expensive especially now with tariffs and duties and stuff, it makes it even more complex. Customer service being at the same time zones in the same language, right? So there's a lot that we would have to do to be able to do that, but that's the ambition. We want a runner anywhere in the world to be able to have the exact same experience with us. And so that hopefully is, that past that 5-year mark, what you would hopefully start to see.
Yeah, and I hope that the listeners are feeling the way that I'm feeling right now, because first of all, I'm like, I can't wait to try the shoes, and I hope that people listening to this are like, oh, I need to go try those shoes. But I also hope that, and I think that the listeners, people listening to this will feel like, oh, I really need to check this brand out if they haven't already, because of the things you're saying, because of I don't know, there's something about the way you're communicating this where it makes it very real, genuine, and I really appreciate that. And I also want to give you and your team some credit because obviously for this podcast, it's hard sometimes to get guests on or get in touch with people. I messaged you on LinkedIn and that's just a week ago, and here we are. And your colleague Massimo too, like super nice. I just really appreciate you taking the time and the way communication has been. So it's you're really representing the brand and you walk the talk, and I appreciate that.
That's really nice to hear. I appreciate that, and as I said earlier, maybe I'll take a second to sort of take that in and be appreciative of our team and the way that they handled themselves. So I really appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, no, I mean it, and thank you again for guesting the Marathon Podcast, Matt. Really
thanks
appreciate
for having
it.
me.
Yeah, thank you, and good luck. Can't wait to see where Tracksmith ends up in the future.
Thank you.
Like I said at the end of this conversation, I am very impressed with Matt. I'm very impressed with Tracksmith. I feel like the person that I'm talking to is the same person that writes those letters that you get in the newsletter from Tracksmith. And I also feel like everyone that I've met that works in Tracksmith, whether it's in the store, Matt here, or people that I've been in touch with from Tracksmith, they're all the same. They're super nice, super kind, and that's something that I really, really appreciate. I feel like this episode was great to have today, because today, if you're listening to this on the day that it comes out, the Boston qualifying registration window closes at 5 p.m. today, Eastern time. And if you haven't already, you have to hurry up and register for the Boston Marathon if you obviously ran a BQ. I am super stoked about this conversation with Matt. I hope that you enjoyed it. And just want to thank you again for listening to the Marathon Podcast. I'm going to go look at Tracksmith's shoes. I hope that you'll do the same. Obviously not getting anything for like saying this. I'm just genuinely excited and interested in it as a passionate runner. Have a great weekend if you're listening to this on the day that it comes out. If not, have a good run. And again, appreciate you being here. You'll listen to the Marathon Podcast, brought to you by Wall Studio.